in the end, the game is going in a different direction, right? The last few years, there's been a shifting of the sands somewhat around international cricket, and we'd be completely naive to think that players would turn down huge amounts of money on long-term contracts for a lot less work in these T20 leagues because they should be playing international cricket. Those days are fast approaching to be over. So what you've got to do is you've got to work with these players, you've got to work with these leagues and try and allow, ideally, players to have their cake and eat it too, because you want your best players playing. It's not good enough to say, you know what, if they don't want to play international cricket for us, then bugger them, we'll move on and find someone different. Because as a spectator, you want to see the best players in the world representing their countries as well. So I think you've got to work with them, and that's something which we'll be challenged with in the next sort of while.
That's the modern challenge of cricket right there. Brendan McCullum on the future with the franchise cricket, the money that's available there. He was with Izzy and Kempy on SENZ last week. I couldn't recommend that to you enough as a chat. It follows on from where Bharat and I left our conversation on Wednesday, and the trigger point was Jofra Archer reportedly being offered the multi-million-dollar year-round contract for loyalty to his IPL side rather than playing for England in the future. Crash, that's it. That's the modern tension point. And you'd love to have a quick glimpse a decade into the future and see how this resolves.
It's coming, Jared, and it's unstoppable. It just is. I can feel it in conversations with managers, players, that these IPL franchises that have got teams in 3 or 4 different competitions, they offering irresistible money. And there's a new generation of cricketer who 20 years ago, when you saw the little state profiles of players, what's your goal for the season? To take 5 Sheffield Shield wickets in an innings and maybe 40 all up, 30 all up. What's your goal this time? To get an IPL deal. It's so changing. And there's plenty of friction points, Jared, and I'll give you just one, okay? When a player goes back to his county or state, there's this issue now of who looks after him. I know Alex Stewart's spoken about it at Surrey there. When all these guys want 2020 contracts, if a guy gets injured playing 2020 cricket, well, shouldn't it be the IPL's job to look after him? I know in one state of Australia, an IPL player who trained in the nets at his home city where he's been training for 20 years got a bill recently because he is no longer part of their system. So who looks after them? But it is anyone who doesn't think that it's all changing is a fool, and that, as you say, it's heading down the road of soccer, where in the EPL your stars get released to play for their country and not the other way around.
And it is interesting to look at just how good this IPL tournament has been. So I've had it on every morning, and the crowds, the power of it, the thrilling finishes. Is Bharat, who's been watching it, sort of laid it all out for us last week. But we can't... I feel like there's a conceit here. You go, we love Test cricket. You and I, we love Test cricket. There's something going on in cricket which feels a little bit foreign. It's definitely threatening. But if you glance in at it, that's where it's happening. The IPL has been just a phenomenon this season.
Oh, look, it is, and I blow both ways, Jared, because I've always wanted to see cricket conquer the United States, and at last it's got a format to do it, and it will do it. It will become, to those millions of expats Indians in the United States, this major league that's starting off, it will grow and grow and grow. And it's the one thing I've always wanted to see in my cricket lifetime, cricket crack the States, where international cricket actually started with a game between USA and Canada years and centuries ago. But that by the by, you're right. I love the way it's engaging young fans, and you've just got to keep reminding yourself, just like facets of Live Golf, that it's not for you and me. It's for the young fan to try and get them going, and that's what it's doing. I was driving past a cricket net the other day, watching a 9-year-old kid play, and he was doing ramp shots, which would have been unimaginable to you and I but that's the future, and you've got to concede the game is changing. You mentioned the IPL. I saw Sky Yadav produce a shot I've never seen before the other day.
Yep.
This squeezed offside drive where he slices the ball over gully for 6. If you try it in the backyard, you'll need 120 goes before you hit the middle. He did it twice in a row.
There's so much great cricket involving Australia this calendar year. None of it's on our shores. So we've had the Indian series, we've got the World Test Championship, then the Ashes and a World Cup, a 50-over World Cup. It means there's not much left for our summer of cricket. It's going to start very late. The first test starts December 14. Pakistan go Perth, Melbourne, Sydney. And then we've got these hangover tests in the middle to late February against the West Indies. The 17th of January in Adelaide, which is a day test, and then the Gabba becomes the day-night test. It starts on January 25. We know that Australia Day will be day 2. What did you make of the schedule when it was released overnight?
Uninspiring.
Yeah.
Look, we're spoilt this winter. The next 2 months will be drop-dead gorgeous, the World Test Championship v India. Every now and then you just get a stinker, and they're rare. And this is a tough one, I have to say. 3 tests against the Pakistan and 2 against the West Indies. I spoke to people from the Gabba, and I said, how do you feel about getting the last test of the summer against the West Indies? And they said, you know who we've got next year? Probably India for the first test of the summer of 5. The following year, England for the first test of 5. And that is sustaining us, that nurturing thought of those 2. But you can't get away from it, Jared. Like, I'm not going to talk it up and say it's a great schedule because they're 2 of the least drawing teams. They may surprise, and there'll be some nice themes there, but nothing that's going to compare with the Ashes or even the World 50-over World Cup in India in October.
There wasn't much Cricket Australia could do. I remember asking Nick Hockley during the summer, would we have the Australia Day test back because of the way the schedule was going to land? There wasn't. He didn't want that. There wasn't much he could do to avoid Australia Day. He couldn't start it on January 26 because it has become a day which is so divisive at the moment, which is a totally different conversation and one that needs to be rectified. But so starting on the 25th in Brisbane, Australia Day will be day 2. How do you think they've landed that?
Yeah, Ash Gardner spoke overnight and said she didn't like it. She felt that they'll struggle to get people, Indigenous elders, to perform Welcome to Country. She's never liked the concept. Usman Khawaja spoke about 20 minutes ago where I am at Border Field saying he didn't mind playing on that day, but he just feels Australia Day should be moved. Yeah. I never liked Cricket Australia's explanation for playing on Australia Day, saying, we want to educate people. It's purely for commercial interests. Education's got nothing to do with it. No one sits at the Gabba with a 10-ounce beer in their hand and is educated about the whims of Australia Day. I mean, if you just come out and say straight it's commercial interest, then just be honest with people. But, it is a tricky one and it's a divisive one. And I still feel that the most chastening statistic and there are millions of statistics about Australian cricket is the fact that only 2 male Indigenous cricketers, Jason Gillespie and Scott Boland, have played male test cricket for Australia, despite the fact that the first touring team to England was fully Indigenous. Yeah. Where do we go wrong, Jared? And it's a howling statistic.
Yeah. In all the talk around the Ashes and this week's build-up, what most caught your eye? Is it England's injury list?
Yes, and it's why we're going to win, Jared. I'm so glad you asked the question because it just came across me the other day. And you know what? I'll give it to you in one sentence. Ben Stokes' knee injury. Because he's injured and he's struggling to bowl, there's a ripple effect through the whole team, which will make them choose an extra bowler. It'll affect their batting and wicket keeping. And I know Jimmy Anderson's injured as well, and I know Archer's injured as well. But it's this Stokes injury. When you've got Cameron Green sitting there for you, just about ready to blossom. I just made up my mind last week that Australia's going to win the Ashes, Jared. I just did,
I feel like, so we've gone from the chest out English commentary that's been coming across the world and quite rightly raising their questions around Australia's strategy and whether we're a bit spooked by Bazball, to the return of, I would say, a more natural pessimism, which we're starting to see now. It suits them much better to be pessimistic, I think.
Yeah, there'll be so many lovely stories come out of this series, and none will be more fun to read or monitor than when Bazball has a day from hell, where they get bowled out for 121 in 15 overs. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because it has to endure that, and they have to move forward from there. They are committed, England playing this philosophy, and they are not turning back. It is how Stokes wants to be remembered as a captain, as the guy that with the broadsword who never put that broadsword in the holster. Like, he wants to do it. He's committed with declarations, everything. So I just think that it's exhilarating and what lies ahead of us. But yeah, the tide seems to be turning. You're right. I mean, Hazelwood back bowling, Michael Neser scoring 80 for Glamorgan and then 4 for 40 in the same game. Called into the squad. You know, interesting. It's interesting.
That part of it is, this is where Australia will be fine. I know we want to say who's in the squad and who's out of the squad, but when I read that Neser and Abbott are going to train with Australia, that they are clearly there if strategically Andrew McDonald and the selectors go, actually, do you know what? We want Neser to play in this first test. That won't be a big step.
No, exactly. And, you know, we keep mentioning it, and that swing bowlers, we never liked them in Australia, but we haven't won the Ashes since 2001 in England. And every time at the end of the series, we often said, you know, the guy we lacked was just that old-fashioned hooping swing bowler, that bloke, that English sort of bowler that just does a bit of nibble and a bit of swing and a bit of hoop. They win you games in England. They've been winning games in England for 100 years. We stick our chests out and say, mate, we want the blokes to bowl 140 with a bit of grunt and a bit of bounce. But they don't win you games in England, okay? It's a different sort of skill set. So that's why I think Neser, in a very Terry Alderman, Damien Fleming sort of way, is worth a go.
Crash, terrific. Always enjoy our chats on a Monday. Thanks a lot.
I love when we finish with the Ashes, Jared,
Yes.
because it gets me up and excited and just ready for the week ahead. Good on you, mate.
All I'm going to carry is, we're going to win. Robert Craddock's declaration. Mark it down, May 15.